So I'm here to talk about millennials, right? What millennials are, but more than just the millennials, also just the population in general, right? How do we sell to different populations? And it's becoming more and more of a factor with everything that's online, everything the way that we operate, our sales tools, our sales process, the way that things, the speed of the transaction and so forth. So I'm going to cover a little bit of that from the perspective not only of a millennial, but then also from kind of a whole range of what's happening in the marketplace. So millennials, right? Why they matter. So first and foremost, want to talk a little bit about something that's closely related, which is Blockbuster versus Netflix. And what's interesting today is if you guys were to open up your phones, on most of you, I'm assuming, all have smartphones, but one of the headlines today actually was that they're no longer producing the VCR. So if you want to go buy a VCR, you need to go buy one now because they're not going to produce it, right? That is an old phase. It's moved out. I didn't even know that they were still making VCRs, but supposedly they are. So if you want to go buy one, you got to get it soon. So I want to talk a little bit, though, about Blockbuster and Netflix and what happened with this, right? It's one of the most studied cases in any university that you go to, especially in a lot of MBA classes. But what happened was, we can see the revenue here in Blockbuster, right, soaring. You're a 2004 time frame, 2005. We were all in love with Blockbuster. We all would go and we would rent videos, and we loved their late fees. They'd screw us over left and right on their late fees, but we still kept on going to it, right? Then if you didn't rewind your video, you got screwed again, and next thing you know, you were a day late with an unrewinded video. You might as well just buy the thing and give them a new copy because you were getting screwed. That was their philosophy. That's where they made a whole lot of money in that aspect of it. Then all of a sudden, what happened? Streaming and Netflix, but they started mailing DVDs. You guys remember all that? Mail a DVD. Blockbuster thought those guys have no clue what they're doing. They're not into gaming, right? Because they're supposed to make it a Blockbuster night, and people want this instantly. So there's no way that somebody is ever going to plan ahead and say, hey, it's Wednesday. If I submit for it, I can have it by Thursday, and I can still watch my video on Friday, which is when I watch most of my videos. They thought, people aren't going to do that. So now all of a sudden you start taking a look at their revenue. So at the time, it was right around this time frame right in here. Blockbuster kind of starts dropping their revenue down a little bit because the market is starting to pick up with this Netflix. And they started to have meetings. And Netflix was going to sell to Blockbuster for $50 million. And Blockbuster said, no way. In fact, the executives of Netflix said that they were literally laughed out of the room when they presented a $50 million figure to Blockbuster. Now, all of a sudden, Blockbuster, bankrupt. Netflix, it was just evaluated at close to $30 billion. Right? And we're not talking a big time frame here. This was 2009, 2010 time frame when all this happened. It was interesting, the CEO of Blockbuster at the time, he was quoted by saying that people will never give up the experience of going to the movie store and meeting their neighbors and choosing videos with their neighbors. Brick and mortar is the way to go. And he was quoted over and over and over again by not giving up that ghost. Then all of a sudden, Netflix, holy smokes, they try to jump. Blockbuster goes in and they try to jump into the game, but it was too late. Right? Netflix already had the corner of the market. They had the mail system delivery. And the key is that Netflix had a good UI. And for those of you that don't know what a UI is, it's a user interface. So now all of a sudden, Netflix, instead of trying to hire a bunch of people that were stocking shelves, they start hiring software developers. And they start making a quick UI. And now it's converted to what they call as a UX, which is the user experience. They get a good UX. Now they start streaming. Blockbuster's trying to set up kiosk systems. Redbox already has a corner of the market. Boom, Blockbuster's out of business just that quick. One of the most studied cases in business today. So what happened is there was a paradigm shift. Right? The population changed, people changed, but they still wanted to keep the exact same business method in place. And it didn't work. So with that premise, we're going to talk a little bit about our population in the United States with all this in mind with Blockbuster. So the silent generation, okay? We don't worry too much about the silent generation in our business. It is what it is, right? People that are about 68 to 86, most of our marketing is not dedicated to 100%, to a lot of those people. Why? It's the smallest population size, and they're just not really buying much. Thank you. I didn't want to say it out loud, but you did, so I repeated what he said. Baby boomers, right? Biggest generation. Hey, this is our market. Everything is catering to the baby boomers. Holy smokes, we got to capture the baby boomers. They're the ones that have all the money, and let's target all those people. First time in history, that's changed. So now let's look at the Generation X. So this is, right, people today that are about age 34 to age 50. Also known as the latch kids. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that term or not. But essentially, what that means is that during this time when they were growing up, when they were kind of in the high school type age, a lot of their parents started working. And this kind of started to become, in the first time, an era that we started seeing a double income, right? A lot more women into the workforce. Now, all of a sudden, kids were coming home without parents. And they coined that term because they kind of had a gate and a latch that, for whatever reason, and then they became the latch kids. And so that's the Generation X, which right now you're looking at about 66 million people in the world, or in the United States today. So then we look at the Millennials, right? Gen Y. And these guys are the biggest generation of population that we have in the United States today. So why do we care? Right? Go after the lion's share. If I got to take a market segment, I'm going to go after the people that are the biggest people. Right? I got the best chance of selling them something, because if I only got let's say I have 100 units of work, I can either attack 74 million people, or I can go and I can attack 66 million people. Right? Similar to what Mr. Cardone was saying, right? Write them all up, right? The more you get, it's a numbers game. So let's start focusing on the generation of the biggest, right? So let's take a look, though, specifically at the Georgia population. Right? Quite frankly, you guys probably don't really care about what's happening in Southern California or Oregon or Utah or whatever's on the West Coast. You care more about your specific market. So let's focus on that, right? What does it look like here in Georgia? So we can see here that the silent generation, once again, the oldest generation, you're looking at about 264,000 people. Right? It is the smallest generation by far. The next piece of things, come on. Oh, no. No battery? Oh, there we go. Okay, baby boomers. Baby boomer population. What you'll notice here in particular is that the younger that the age breaks down, the bigger that shape is, the more weight that it holds. And what's interesting about the Georgia population is that it is a younger state. There is a lot more young people in Georgia than there are in the majority of the United States. So it matters to you guys to understand how to focus on that part of the generation. Generation X, right, as we're knowing, right, starting to get bigger and bigger and bigger. We're almost at 1 million people. And here's Generation Y. So we're over 1 million people in the millennial aspect of things. And when you look at the Georgia population versus the whole United States population, you'll notice that you're at almost a 32% of your population is right in that wheelhouse between about 18 to 30 years old. Right? That's a significant amount of people. right? The national average, you're looking somewhere around the 30% range when you talk about millennials. So like I said, in Georgia, you guys have a lot more young people that are in this area, which is why Georgia is one of the major metropolitans, right? It's booming. It's a big market for Dealer Socket. It's a big market for a lot of my competitors, right? We know that there's a lot of activity that happens here and a lot of people are moving here. So start looking at, right, why does this matter? So when we started doing some of the research, we found out that today, that the millennial typically does about 14 hours of research before entering a dealership. So now all of a sudden, instead of them just walking into the dealership blind, we all know that they've got a good background of what's happening, right? And on average, you're looking at about 14 hours of online research. Okay, the problem is that 14 hours is spanned between both franchise, both independent, Auto Trader, your website, cars.com, Edmunds, everywhere. And typically speaking, the best, we call it the UX, right? The best user interface or user exchange is going to receive more time. And obviously, the more time that they have, the better of a chance that they've got of going in. So we know that if websites aren't that good, people aren't spending time on them. If it is not what they call either A, mobile optimized, or B, oh man, now the term lost my mind, responsive, which means it doesn't matter what device you're on, you're still going to get the full suite of products. The millennials will not stay on your site, and they will move on to another one that is. It's another thing I'm going to bring up is they do not have a lot of patience with things that don't fit their schedule. And me being a millennial, right, I'm going to argue anybody that's 20 or 25 years old in any generation typically don't have a whole lot of patience. So, the other thing, because they've done so much research online, they're not visiting dealerships, which you guys can all attest to, right? We all know that traffic is down. And so the statistics tell us that typically speaking, the dealership visits are down to 1 to 2 dealership visits, whereas back in 2005, they were jumping from dealership to dealership to dealership. And they would typically go to, on average, about 5 dealerships before they bought a car. Now they're down to 1 or 2. So if somebody is in your store, they're going to be buying. That's the key. They're typically going to buy from you if they come to your store. And this I thought was really interesting as well too. So 20% of people shop outside of their market, which means, number one, right, they're pushing a lot to the internet. Number 2, they're looking at websites. And 3, they want transparency. Because if you give them transparency, they are going to go the extra little distance to get what they're looking for. And they don't mind driving to get what they want. Most people, right, are okay with that. But 1 in 5, I think is a significant amount for us to be able to recognize that people are leaving their own particular market to get something. So, the other aspects of a millennial, we're going to talk about time frame here. So the studies have all shown that most people nowadays are getting married a lot later in life. They are not a big type of commitment type of people. So they're having kids a lot later in life as well too. And we're excited right now. I always say we're expecting twins, but I'm not expecting anything. My wife is expecting. So we're expecting twins. We're excited about that. But we're a little bit later in life. Excuse me, we're a little bit later in life. My wife would probably kill you, but she's 38. You don't need to tell her that I told you that. So if it's posted online, I'm going to be mad. But anyways, but the other thing too is home ownership and car ownership. We've noticed that people it's harder for them to make these commitments right when they're coming out of school. And a lot of it has to do with debt that they have, which pushes them to our market as well too. So the key to this is follow-up, right? Like similar to what Grant was saying, he just pounds the phones. phone call after phone call after phone call, and he wears them down, right? That is a big key to selling to millennials, is making sure that you are in touch with them. Why? Because their decision-making process is a lot longer than what it used to be. And they want that consistent follow-up. The more you follow up with the customer, the better of a chance that you have of selling them. You have to pound them. They're used to it. They're used to the emails, right? They're used to this type of stuff. Next, education. So this was interesting when I was doing some of my research here, that this is the most educated population in history. You can debate that or not, but the numbers all prove that there's more people that take A, higher education, and then B, masters, than any other time in the history. And it's not only by numbers, because people are going to argue with me and say, well, yeah, there's a lot more people, so obviously there's a lot more educated people. But even based off of the statistics, it's still showing that there's more people in a higher education than there's ever been in the history of the United States. And also what is interesting is that women are outperforming men as well, too, in the millennial generation. There you go, right? Whereas historically, there's always been more men that have been going through the master's programs and higher education. You can see here that there's 170,000 more bachelor's degrees earned by women than there were men. And that's based off about an average of the last 5 years. So, what does that mean for us, right? How do we change the way that we think? At the end of the day, the workforce understands deals now. The workforce and the buying population. Right? There's no longer the days of where we can kind of roll things in and hope that they don't really understand. They want to take out their financial calculators. They want to plug it into their Google, right? When you're talking to them, they're plugging it into Google, and it's populating really what's coming out. They understand the way that the deal structures work. So if you're not transparent with them, right, you're going to cost yourself deals, and ultimately it makes people angry. It upsets people. The same thing, right, with the workforce. So you need to demand out of the workforce today that they use the current tools. It's no longer acceptable to not use the tools that you provide for them. Whether if it be your online tools, whether if it be your eBays, your CRMs, your DMSs. They understand it. And it must be demanded from our generation to them, and they get it. So next, tech savvy. So I often get accused of, all I do is I sit around and play games on my phone. Right? What's the new one is the Pokemon Go, right? Every freaking kid walking around today has his Pokemon Go. And it's all that they care about. Right? Not true. Because what's happening is that we've started to see that mobile is now used more for research and education than it is for gaming. And we're starting to see a switch in that right now. What's interesting is I have a couple of friends. We live in Salt Lake, which I don't know if you guys have been there recently. They're now referred to it as the Silicon Slopes. It is a major tech boom that is happening in Salt Lake, right? You look out our window, and we see 17 buildings right now that are being built that are tech firms that are moving over, and a bunch of startup firms that are coming. Right? Everything is mobile. Everything is mobile optimized. So one of the things that one of my buddies runs a company there that was actually kind of an interesting story. It was two guys that were in college. They came to their professor with this idea that they were going to start an education program on their mobile device, a corporate education program on their mobile device. And so what happens is they now take essentially training units and training videos, and they can drop it into these mobile devices, and it's called an LMS, right, a learning management system. And they came to their professor with it, and all of a sudden he said, well, that was a great idea. They invested money into it, and now it's about an $80 million company 4 years later. It's because People now research on a mobile device, right? It's catching on like fire right now. And so what happens is, our website, right? Kind of what I was alluding to a little bit earlier, is that if your website is not mobilely optimized, millennials don't want to be on it. They will just move right on past that. The next thing, right? Sales knowledge. So the other thing is when a millennial comes up to your dealership and they come into a car that has technology, right? I think we would all agree that cars have a lot more technology than what they used to. So when I was 16, I was always a hot rod guy. Anybody in here hot rod guys? Hot rod people? Awesome. So I drove a 65 Mustang, a GT 65 Mustang when I was in high school. Right? I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I used to work on it, the whole 9 yards. And my idea of technology was that I took a radio and I wired it, hardwire onto the battery so that I could have a radio without cutting my car. And then I took a PA system and I hooked it up onto the radio as well too so that I could yell at people from my PA in my car, almost like the police officers. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And when my car was making more squeaks, I would just turn my radio up and I wouldn't hear any squeaks, and I thought my car ran great. That was my ideas of technology in a car, right? Today, it's a whole lot different. Everything is now connected through Bluetooth. Everything is now connected through, right? Half the cars have the internet on them today, whether it be OnStar, whatever it might be. There's a lot more technology in cars. And the frustration that the millennial generation have is when they go up to a vehicle and your people can't explain it to them. They get really frustrated, right? They want that technology in their vehicle. And we're getting to the dealership, right? I remember I bought an '08 Acura a number of years ago. It was a used car. And I went up to it and I said, okay, here's my phone and I want it paired up. And the guy had no idea what was even going on, right? And it was a frustrating experience for me, to the point where he had to go get somebody else who had to go get somebody else. And at that point, I'm 2 hours deep into this thing, and I'm like, I really would never recommend somebody to go back to this dealership. Right? They clearly don't understand a user experience. Kind of going back to the whole, why did Netflix stay in business? Like I was saying earlier, they had UX designers, user interface experience. It was a positive experience for them, so people start referring back to them. Your people can't explain the technology into the cars. The salespeople get frustrated and you start getting less referrals. So the Google Triangle. Anybody heard of the Google Triangle? One guy in the back, two people? Okay. So the Google Triangle. What this is a heat map of where people click on Google. And you can Google Triangle. It's almost like, man, if you look into a mirror, and in the mirror, what mirror you see, and you Google, and it doesn't know what's going on. Anyways, here's the Google Triangle. So what this tells me here is that 90% of clicks happen right here. I'm sorry. It goes down to here is 90. This whole area right here. As soon as you drop off into here, you're getting about 10% of clicks down in this area, and you're getting maybe 1% to 2% down over here. So now all of a sudden, you Google your dealership, or you Google use the cord and make them. If you're not in here, do you think people are going to your website? No. Potentially over here, if you're buying some things, they're going to go see you. So everybody's all upset that their web traffic is staying the same. And everybody's, the thing that I always hear, and maybe it's just different markets, but I always hear this. Oh yeah, the franchise guys, oh man, they get all this traffic. They got all this money that they dump into everything. And they're taking all the traffic, right? Their business is booming. They've never had a better time in the history of their business right now. They're crushing it, right? You start Google searching things, you wonder why? They're in the Google Triangle. They get this stuff. All of a sudden you take the population, huge on the millennials. Where do they shop? Shop online. You're not on the Google Triangle? You're on page 2? Why be on Google if you're on page 2? How many of you guys go to page 3 of Google? Right? I always love when you go Google and it's like G and then it's like GL, right? And then it's like there's 80 million things that come up on the search, right? Who cares? All you need is like, if you're not in the top 5, you're not there. And I'm sure some of these other guys are going to talk a little bit more about that. Maybe you probably even heard some of this stuff. So, transparency, the fear of the unknown. These guys are not risk takers, right? That's why their decision-making process has been delayed. They are not big risk takers. One reason is debt, right? A lot of these guys have debt on the books. These guys go to school. A lot of these guys are going to school and they got a lot of debt and they don't want to make big commitments to it. They got bad credit or they got no credit, which is good for us. So the thing about that, right, how do we combat the fear of the unknown? You've got to have a particular sales process. Most of these people are all used to a syllabus. They go into college, they go into high school, and every single thing is outlined for them. On week 1, you're doing this, and chapter 2, you're going to be doing this, and then chapter 3, you're doing this. And guess what? If they deviate from chapter 3, they get all pissed off. And they say, whoa, this wasn't outlined in the syllabus. You're going outside of the process, right? They have a hard time handling that. They like all the information outlined for them. So now all of a sudden they go into a buying experience where they're making one of the biggest purchases, and there's not really an outlined process for them. It's difficult for them to really get that. And you go into stores, and some people barely greet you. Some people, right, they have, on the internet, there really is just kind of this, we call them as soon as they call us. There's not an outline for these people. They want that. You have to understand that, right? And so when you speak about the workforce, people that you're hiring that are millennials, explain to them. Step 1, we do this. Step 2, we do this. Step 3, we do this. Step 4, we do this. And we get it. All of a sudden, we get a little roadmap, and whew, things start working for us. And so the key is that, A, when I'm meeting with customers that are millennials, you better make sure that your people know the sales process. And number 3, your employees, train them. They're expecting it to come from kind of the higher-ups, if you will, the people that have gone before them. Next piece here. They're very practical people. So what do I mean by that? Time. Right? Time is a big commodity. And what happens is that they don't want to wait. When they show up to the dealership, they've already done on average, about 14 hours of research. When they show up, they don't want to be sitting in a showroom. When they call, like what Grant was saying, they don't want it to go to voicemail. They want somebody to pick up the phone immediately. And they want to get to their response immediately. And if they're not, right, the statistics have all shown, they move on. I think it was 75, if I'm not mistaken, it was 75 or 80-ish % of emails that are not mobilely optimized are deleted. And yet we sit here and we send out emails where you got to scroll through them. Or some people don't even check the emails that they send out to see if they are mobilely optimized. Right? And the problem is nobody reads them. They're scrolling and pinching and moving over. Millennials aren't doing that. I'm going to tell you that much. They just delete it. They don't even read it. Another thing, they have very little tolerance for being oversold. And then they become, this is the best part, right? They become extremely vocal about it. They are true believers, and I'm sure you guys would all agree with this. They truly believe the squeaky wheel gets the grease. and they squeak. And so what ends up happening is you tell them about all this great thing and this product works and you're trying to be transparent, and then they have a bad experience with it. They go ballistic on you. Whereas if you tell them at the beginning, they process that information. So now all of a sudden, we start thinking about how are we going to sell to these people? Well, A, response time. Unless you have a process in place for a response time, you're not going to capture the millennial generation. So think about it like this. People buy from Amazon, right? Especially anybody Amazon Prime people in here? A lot of people, right? Amazon Prime. So guaranteed 2-day delivery. So when you go and you buy something on Amazon Prime, I expect that on my doorstep within 2 days. If they do not deliver it in 2 days, what am I doing? I am raising hell. Yeah, you're right. But I'm calling them. I'm going to call them and I'm going to tell them, look, you guaranteed me a 2-day delivery system, and I'm sitting on day 3 without my product. Do I call them on day 1? No, because they already set the expectation that they were going to deliver it in 2. So the thing is all these people are sending internet leads into a dealership, and they're not getting immediate response back as far as when you plan on contacting them. So if I send in information to a dealership or to anywhere, and they say, we'll be back in touch with you within 30 minutes, 45 minutes, I'm okay with that. Now all of a sudden it's 2 hours, I'm moving on. Right? So set the expectation as far as when you plan on getting back in touch with them, and then make sure you've got a dang good process that's going to outline how you plan on doing that. So here I am, I'm online and I'm shopping, boom, I send you a lead, and instantly it comes back and it says, hey, we'll get back with you within 20 to 30 minutes. I'm not going anywhere else to keep shopping. I'm waiting for those people to get back to me. Versus I go to a different store and I send in an internet lead, and I wait 20 minutes before I hear something, I'm moving on. No thanks. I'm going to go over to these guys. And guys, I mystery shop people all the time. Right? There is a lot of people that never tell me when they're going to get back to me. Or they send me an autoresponder that says, hey, we received your inquiry. Right? We'll get back to you in a timely manner. For me, timely manner is 3 minutes. Right? It's like in sports, right? They always talk about a 2-minute warning. A 2-minute warning, which I think is a bunch of crap. The whole world has gone to a 2-minute warning, and I just think that, anyways, I just can't imagine everything being a 2-minute warning. But in reality, that's what people, right? That's their time frame. So get back to them, outline the specifics, and when you're going to get back to them, and then on the back end, make sure you have a process in place. So trust factors, right? This was shocking to me as I started doing a little bit more research in things. So 40% of people, they took a survey of somewhere about 5,000 people that were considered millennials, and they said rank where your trust factor is within these different things. And there was family member, there was friends, there was online referrals, there was ads, there was magazines, there was TV, and so forth. And this was interesting, is 40% of people said that they trust online reviews more than anything out there on the market. So before they're going to pick up the phone and call their parents or their friends, they're going to look to see what people said online about it. And they believe what people say online about it. So now all of a sudden, you start going to your websites, or you start going to your reviews, and you don't have any on there? Or the people say, I had a bad experience? Now all of a sudden, you're going to lose their attention, 40% of it. To me, that's a big number. So online reviews, Facebook. This was, we all know about Facebook. We all know about Snapchat. I know Grant was talking about how, look, we just got to hit the phones. And he was like, I'm not even getting to the Facebook and the Snapchat thing and all the aspect of it. But in my mind, right, get to stage 102. Get to separate yourself. You've got somebody that just buys a car from you. On average, people have 200 friends on Facebook, average person. So you're talking millennials probably have 500, where the older population probably has 50. So now all of a sudden, you get somebody that buys a car from you. Do you have a process in place where they go and they take a picture of themselves and post it on Facebook and say, hey, I just had a great experience at ABC Motors? Instantly you're hitting 500 people on their Facebook or their Snapchat or their Instagram. Right? People that do it sell more cars. It is proven. And yet we don't do it. So the next thing, text messages. I think most of us are all on board with text messaging. 60% of emails are deleted, if not formatted correctly. So you have to be able to be, right, your software has to be mobilely optimized, is essentially what it has to do. So the delivery method, and then, the quality. I can't tell you how many people send just emails that go to spam. It's insulting. I had this dealership. I was in Orlando, and I was buying a vehicle. And it was Lexus of Orlando. Lexus of Orlando. And so I go and I submit a lead to them. And about an hour later, the guy calls me and says, did you get my email? And I said, no. He goes, oh, that's because most of our emails go to spam. You want to check your spam filter? I said, no. And I moved on. Why does that happen? Right? We need to be monitoring this type of stuff. No one wants to go into spam. Everyone's scared to death if they go into the spam filter. No matter what they click on, they're going to see either Viagra pills, which millennials don't need, or they're going to go see some sort of virus. So make sure your emails are delivered, right, accurately. And so that's what we have to say as far as the millennial generation goes. I'm a big believer in that there is a different method to the population. So the older generation, the baby boomers, they do have a different buying method. They're typically a lot more cash heavy. They've got a lot more disposable income versus the millennials. Right? The millennial people, just as a summary, they're doing the research online before they're even coming into your dealership. They do not want to waste their time. They're an extremely efficient population, and as they go through, they don't want to be waiting. And when they start waiting, they start getting very vocal about things. So I appreciate your guys, your time for allowing me to be here. And with that, I will turn it over to the next speaker here.
Thank you, Todd.